一个印度主播带着满满的预设剧本，准备在镜头前狠狠干一票国际正义的大戏。本以为别人要跟着一起创双簧，摇旗呐喊，结果呢，对面的美国上校直接一顿输出，当场把剧本撕了稀碎。那场面简直就是一个冲上舞台想扮超级英雄，结果人家直接抬手把舞台灯都给你关了。这就像孙子兵法说，未战而妙算胜者，得算多也。问题是这个印度阿三算盘打得震天响，结果发现自己连算盘珠子都没带齐。大家好，欢迎来到老纪，我是大钊。先看印度三哥的剧本，他想代表世界审判中国。整场访谈开局其实非常典型。这印度阿三上来就摆出一个标准西方话术模板：中国扩张主义、亚太威胁论、台湾问题、中印边境冲突。这四件套就像网络喷子吵架的祖传技能包。它的潜台词其实很简单：中国是威胁，美国你快承认，然后顺便把印度抬成战略合作伙伴。听起来是不是很熟啊？这就像古代青楼里那位拉客的镌刻，自己未必有多强，但最擅长制造气氛。你看历史就知道，唐朝长安的胡商，宋代汴梁的牙人，明清江南的镌刻，本质上都是一类角色。他们不生产价值，他们只生产关系。印度这几年其实也在做类似的定位，努力把自个儿包装成中美之间的关键变量。但问题来了，国际政治从来不是靠自我感动。孔子早就说过一句话：名不正则言不顺。如果你的实力配不上你的定位，那所有的话术只能是舞台烟雾。看阿三秀完，咱们再来看看美国上校的反击，一刀封喉。这位美国上校完全没按剧本走，相信阿三也没想到，当主持人试图引导他说中国是敌人的时候，人家直接回答不是敌人，顶多是竞争对手。然后更狠的一句来了：美国现在很多问题是自己造成的。这句话就像武侠小说里高手对决，别人呢还在摆架势，他呢已经收剑入鞘，说你根本就不是我的对手。接下来上校就开始一顿猛输出。美国一年军费接近 1.5 万亿美元，中国呢在稀土领域投资200亿美元。然后他问了一个灵魂问题：谁更有战略眼光？这一刻节目气氛直接给凝固，因为这不是立场争论，而是现实拆台。上校讲了一段非常深刻的话，他说美国现在不是供应链的问题，而是人质状态。什么意思？简单来说现代战争早就不是枪炮坦克，真正的战争是工业体系。中国掌握着全球稀土冶炼能力，没有这些材料，高端芯片、隐形战机、导弹系统都只是摆设。这就像管子所说：仓廪实而知时节。经济基础从来决定战略高度。历史上英国打第一次世界大战的时候犯过类似的错误。英国宣战德国后才发现自己军用光学设备严重依赖德国，结果就是战争刚开始供应链就给断了。这不是战略，这是赌命。而美国现在某种程度上正在重复这个错误。上校其实还透露了一个更深层的现实。他说美国现在的国家安全战略缺乏系统性思考。这句话非常耐人寻味，因为美国过去几十年的逻辑是军事压制、金融控制、舆论塑造三位一体。但问题是当工业量外移、债务膨胀、盟友离心之后，这套体系正在出现裂缝。你看看现实，日本开始减持美债，中东国家搞货币多元，欧洲在安全议题上摇摆。这其实印证了《资治通鉴》里的历史规律：势不可使尽，福不可享尽。任何霸权一旦走到极盛，就开始走向反噬。很多家人会问，印度为何频频碰瓷中国？印度为什么总要在中美之间刷存在感？原因其实很现实。印度一直希望成为第3级大国，但问题是工业基础、科技体系、基础设施、军事协同能力这些指标，印度都还在追赶阶段。于是呢，出现一个奇特的现象：战略定位先于国家能力。这就像古代诸侯国里那种还没统一3郡呢，就已经开始问鼎中原。结果呢，往往只有一个。战国策里讲得最透：德不配位，必有灾殃。上校最有意思的一段是关于扩张问题。当阿三不断强调中国扩张时，上校反问中国在哪里扩张？然后他说了一句非常具有争议的话：台湾属于中国。这句话直接把阿三给噎住了。 更关键的是他提出一个战略观察，中国更关心的是财富积累跟产业优势，而不是传统的殖民扩张。这其实符合现代大国竞争的模式。历史早就证明，领土帝国成本极高，罗马、代英帝国、日本帝国最终都败在过度扩张上。而现代竞争更多变成技术控制、供应链控制、资本控制，这是一种更隐秘的力量。上校还说了一段特别经典的历史比喻，他说如果一个帝国真的开始疯狂扩张，往往先会自己崩溃。日本二战就是典型的案例，扩张的越远，补给就越困难，成本就越高，社会压力就越大，最后拖垮自个儿。这跟孙子兵法一句话完全契合，兵贵胜不贵久。任何长期消耗战都是强国的坟墓，美国在阿富汗战争就是典型的例子，损失了2万亿，甚至美国现在38万亿美元的美债，很可能都是这2万亿利滚利滚出来的。这场对话真正揭示了3个现实：第一，全球格局正在多极化；第二，军事霸权正在被工业体系挑战；第三，话语权不再只靠意识形态，而靠产业能力。这就像中国古代王朝更迭的规律，秦靠军功统一天下，汉靠制度稳固江山，唐靠经济繁荣维系统治。每个时代权力形态都不同，很多人看这类国际争论只看表面情绪，但真正值得关注的是，世界正在从谁拳头大转向谁产业链长。未来国家竞争核心将集中在能源、材料、科技制造上，谁控制这些，谁就掌握战略主动权。这段对话之所以爆火，并不是因为谁骂了谁，而是因为它揭开一个事实：世界秩序正在重构。印度三哥想借冲突抬高自个儿地位，美国在调整战略重心，中国在积累产业优势。这3条线交织在一起就是当代国际政治的缩影。历史学家汤因比说过一句话：文明不会被外敌毁灭，往往毁于自身结构的失衡。今天的国际格局或许正站在类似的转折点。如果你看到这里，可能会发现一个更有意思的问题：未来的大国竞争到底是枪炮决定还是工厂决定？欢迎把你的答案留在评论区，毕竟能看懂趋势的人永远比追逐热点的人走得更远。
Well, thank you, Colonel, for that zoomed out view. Now, let me try and unpack it one by one. On the NSS document, from what I read, it appeared that China was a legitimate threat. Would you still classify China as, I can't even call it an enemy, is an adversary, I guess, would be a polite way to put it? Adversary number 1 for the United States?
No, because I don't see us in conflict with each other militarily. I think it may be a competitor. Is it number 1? I don't know. It depends. The problem we have with China right now is a problem of our own making. Let's stop and consider something. We're spending $1 trillion a year on the defense budget. That doesn't even address the intelligence operations and the so-called black budget. So you're talking about at least 1.5 to 1.6 trillion every year on the so-called national security state.
Right.
The Chinese spend $20 billion a year cornering the market on rare earths. Who is more powerful?
China.
China, exactly. Right now, we're in the unfortunate position of having opened our mouths and taken a step down the road to disaster without first asking some important questions. If we impose sanctions on country X, what are the consequences? Does country X sell us something that's vital to us? Are we dependent upon country X, whoever that may be? It doesn't appear when one looks at the imposition of these tariffs that anybody sat down and did a systematic analysis of all these countries. I mean, remember, we've been imposing tariffs on everybody. And on the grounds of what? Oh, we're a victim? We're the people that everyone should love? I mean, here Trump gave a stupid speech at Davos saying, well, the Danes aren't very grateful, are they? We helped to defeat, or we, quote unquote, won World War II. Therefore, the Danes owe us. This is sort of silly nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. So I think the first thing is that China, we are dependent upon the supplies of rare earths from them. Why? Because they have a refinery. We do not. There's another refinery in Kazakhstan. There may be another one being built elsewhere, but the point is we can't get the rare earths refined into the elements, the metals, the things that we need gold, silver, lithium, go down the list of the periodic table, and understand that right now, because we can't get those quickly, we are not in a supply chain problem. We are in a hostage situation. We are hostage to China's goodwill. And there's some Chinese bureaucrat in Inner Mongolia sitting next to the refinery saying, well, how much of this do we release to the United States this week? Trump went to Seoul and tried to reach some sort of accommodation, and China gave us a modest accommodation, but he discovered while he was there that he's hostage.
Yes.
And I think that's reflected in the NS, this so-called national security document. He said, well, we better ease up on China. After all, they control all of these things, not just rare earths, but electronic components, all of these things. 9 out of 10 F-35s that we're so proud of operate today because of China.
Yes, critical minerals. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This reminds me always of the British, and the British were a lot smarter before 1900 than they were afterwards. And they went to war in 1918 for no reason at all. Really, it was just foolish nonsense against Germany and Austria-Hungary. And within a day, the first Sea Lord, the man who's responsible for the Royal Navy, the most important component of the British force structure, announces that, well, we are entirely dependent upon optics from Germany for all of our sighting devices. Then they went into chemicals. Well, the Germans were the leaders in chemistry. They were the leaders in optics. We just go down the list. Well, you should have thought of that before you declared war on them. Yeah. In other words, there was this assumption, well, if we do go to war, it's always going to be short, sharp, decisive. Well, unfortunately, most wars between great powers are seldom short, sharp, and decisive. They tend to be long, drawn out, and attritional in nature. Yeah. We're not prepared for that now. So all I can say is there is no serious foundation to strategic thinking today in the United States.
But you've got to, just let me push back a little bit on this one, on China. I mean, the fact is the CCP has expansionist ideas in the Asia Pacific, and America was the only sort of great power over here pushing back at that. And
where are they?
What do you, okay, let me come up with this. What do you make?
No, wait a minute, though. No, stop. You're saying they're expansionist. Where are they expanding?
Well, we had a bloody skirmish on the borders with them on India. We are the only India was the last the last bloody skirmish they had was with the Vietnamese in the 70s. So Taiwan is obviously one area as well.
No, Taiwan is part of China. That's ridiculous.
One China policy, right?
The people there are Chinese for the most part. And as far as India is concerned, you've had border problems with the Chinese almost from the outset. There has never been a fundamental agreement as to where that border runs through the Himalayas. And sometimes you've done well, and sometimes they've gotten the better of you. You know that.
Yes.
I can't fix that. That's a matter for you and the Chinese. But I don't think the Chinese aspire to march into India and to try to rule that place. It'd be insane to do so. Yeah. I don't think the Chinese want to rule other peoples around the world. What they want to be is enormously wealthy. And that's what they're becoming. And they're going to leverage their wealth for strategic advantage, not necessarily on the ground. Territorial imperialism is a loser. It's a dumb idea. That's why the British should have got pulled out of India at the latest after World War I. But they didn't. They stayed because everything's mortgaged to vanity. Right. All of our overseas commitments right now are truly mortgaged to vanity. No one in Korea or Japan believes the Chinese want to invade them or going to go to war with them. The Vietnamese, they've made it very clear what they're going to do if the Chinese even consider such a thing. So the point is, and then here's another thing to consider. Let's assume I'm wrong. Let's assume the Chinese are interested in territorial expansion. What's the best solution to it? Historically, let it happen. Because empires always overextend themselves. The Japanese overextended themselves. Everyone was upset and excited when the Japanese expanded. But the truth is, the further afield from Japan they moved, the further away from Manchuria and Korea they moved, what happened? They were losing money, they were losing soldiers, and they gained nothing.
When you say
point-
let it happen, you mean it by an American prism. I'm sure the sovereignty of those countries, they wouldn't want it to happen.
Of course not. But the point is, it's a great power. Instead of challenging another great power that could easily escalate to the nuclear level, don't stand in the way of your opponent when he's making mistakes. The Chinese very intelligently have watched us make mistake after mistake after mistake. And where do they sit right now? The Japanese are dumping our debt. The Swedes dump our debt. Everyone is basically running a fire sale on treasury bonds. How much longer can we go on? I don't think it's a good outlook for us. So what do you do if you're Chinese? Do you challenge us militarily? Why? Why bother? We'll sink ourselves.